PowerPoints.
Okay.
But maybe it's first time.
All right, awesome. Welcome everyone to what is, what a reminder to me is the 140th Systems Thinking Ontario session. We haven't been active the last few months because there were some other events that the same community that organizes Ontario was busy with. So I'm glad to be back in person in hybrid mode. So we're in a new room. So forgive us if there's any technical glitches. But as is tradition in the system in the summer months, after the SFI cohort kind of finishes, we've tried to use the June, July, August months to actually have the students share their synthesis maps. It's a great way to like share it with the broader community, give another chance to presenting it, discuss it with an interested audience as well. And so typically, if you're, I'm not sure if most are new or not to Systems Ontario, some familiar faces, but what we do is we kind of go around the room and briefly we just introduce ourselves and just say what our name is, where we're coming from, and what brought you here today. So we'll go, even the presenters can introduce themselves as well. Double introducing yourselves is fine. We'll start on this side in 10 seconds. Your name?
1, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, there we go.
Name and experience with systems thinking.
Name, background, and what brings you here tonight?
Okay, cool. My name is Francisca Mueller. I'm an independent consultant, and I work with academics, thought leaders, and nonprofits to help them design educational programs. And I'm here because I love seeing the hands-on application of systems thinking into systems maps as expressed as visuals. It's always an exciting time of the year.
My name is Sean Patrick Stencil. I work in the environmental sector, so interested in systems thinking. In fact, I've been coming to you for a long time. Why I came here tonight, probably to make myself feel bad about my own inability to do good design. Because I've come to these before and I'm always impressed by the maps. So.
Hi, I'm Marvin Joseph, a service designer with Sunlife. I'm a big fan of systems thinking. I'm trying to bring systems thinking into my works. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Ellen B. I have an extremely long last name, so it's gonna be fine. I'm the founder of Canadian Foresight Network and also happen to be an aspire at OCAD. So I love to see people's systems maps because my groups was terrible.
I'm David Ig, adjunct professor at OCAD, and I take these classes, but I don't do any grading, so I never actually look at the final result. So I find the intermediate result, but I haven't seen the final.
My name is Yashar. I'm an SFI student, actually student of David. So we are presenting our system map, synthesis map, Victoria, and other people online, Roxanne and Chloe. Yeah, so hope you enjoy our synthesis map.
Sure. I'm Greg Van Alstein, and I teach here. I was part of the founding of the SFI program back in the day, and we have a lab upstairs on the 7th floor now that David and Zad and others and I have been meeting at, called S-Lab. So we're kind of shifting from a participatory focus, participatory foresight focus to a systemic design focus. Not because we weren't doing all those things before, but the one thing I guess we sort of perceive that there's more of a market for systemic design, not in relation to foresight, but in relation to, I don't know, need, what a university lab could do, something like that.
I'm Victoria, an SFIer, part-time. We just finished, I guess, our first couple of semesters, work with Yashar on our synthesis map, and yeah, looking forward to sharing it.
Alana Boltzwood. I was once an SFI student. Good to see some familiar faces. And I work in the digital transformation and strategy space, and systems thinking always infuses my work.
I'm Carl. I am also a first-year SFIer, and I'll be presenting today as well, but mine was for Map the System competition. So I did solo work, extracurricular, excited to only have a home for it.
My name is Linda Craig. I've been in the systems thinking group, followed. My area of expertise is actually supply chain, but right now I'm a co-producer of a play. So I'm using system thinking in order to do a lot of the organization with respect to the play.
My name is Zach Khan. I'm host, organized Systems Thinking Ontario. I'm also an SFI graduate. I love to integrate design and systems thinking. That's why I like being part of this community and the OCAD community, and I try to maintain and keep in touch that way.
Hi, I'm Camille. I work in an agency. I lead the UX department there, and I'm here because I keep finding ways that UX is really not defined. It takes on a lot of things, and I think system thinking really much applies to what I do. So I'm very curious about what everybody's going to share today.
And then I'll call out the online folks as if like I'm invoking it from above. But on my monitor, I can only see like the acronyms are a little bit. So I'm gonna like call out the acronym, and then now the acronyms change. We'll go Roxanne, Chloe, Deirdre, Zach. We'll go in that order to start.
Hey everyone, I'm Roxanne. I am a first-year SFI student, and we are presenting our map today. So I'm here mostly to support and answer questions. I worked with Victoria and Yashar and Chloe, so excited to share and see other folks' presentations.
Hello, I am Deirdre. I have a background in service design and qualitative research, and I'm quite interested in the world of systems thinking, and I joined the Banathy conversations a couple of weeks ago, and I'm quite curious about looking at systems maps, so I'm excited about that today.
Yeah, Danielle, you can go ahead.
Whoops. Hi. Yeah, I'm Danielle. I am a candidate in the SFI program as well. I work with a few of the labs on campus, the Cultural Policy Hub, Archipelago of Design, and the Solid Black Collective. And yeah, I'm working on my own consulting and arts on the side. I'm one of the coaches for the Mapless system competition for the Waterloo, one of the Waterloo teams. Thanks.
We'll do Chloe and then Zach.
Hello, I'm Chloe. I'm also SFI student. I work with Yashar, Victoria, and Roxanne. I'm here to present our map for this. Thank you.
Zach, you there?
Yep, I don't have a camera. Hello, everyone. I am a systems thinker enthusiast. I'm looking forward to seeing systems maps because I've never seen one before. So super excited to see what you guys present today.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Awesome to have such a wide variety group here. So we'll start with the first group. The Village People is the name of the group. I'll let you guys kind of share screen, introduce for physical if you want to go up to the monitor as well. It's hybrid.
Are you still okay to share your screen?
And this is the reason why my team never actually presented there. Why can't you compete with this?
So yeah, we went with the Monopoly board as kind of our visual metaphor for our synthesis map, and we're going to get into it, but it's largely because we were exploring the idea of community and kind of this. Everybody wants a villager, but not everyone wants to put in the effort to be. Everyone wants the village, but not everyone wants to put in the effort to be the villager. And we started to dig into what that system could look like. And neoliberal capitalism kind of came out of that as being like a big driver as why people just don't make the effort to be that villager. And so capitalism, monopoly, and that's how we got here. Yeah. I just wanted to share a little bit about like my position when it comes to community. I'm from a really small town where everybody knew everybody, and then I moved to Toronto my life, and I really miss that like neighborhood sort of vibe that I would get being in a small community. Everybody knows everyone. Your kids are walking around. You know, you ask for an egg, you get an egg. And despite being someone who's very comfortable in groups and creating events and stuff like that, I really struggle to just say hi to my neighbors for whatever reason that might be. And so that was kind of part of the reason why I wanted to explore community and what that could bring in our project. So I'm going to start us off just talking a bit more about the problem. Like I said, there's this kind of sentiment that everyone wants a village, but they don't necessarily want to be a villager. And as we looked into that more, we were seeing that Canada in particular has the highest rate of loneliness among other high-income countries. Toronto in particular, there's about 1 million people who report feeling lonely 3 to 4 days a week. And the share of people who have 6 or more close friends has dropped quite a bit, about 30 percentage points since 2023, and Toronto was recently named the loneliest city in Canada. And so, yeah, this is where we're starting to see people want connection, but they don't necessarily want to put in that effort to have the village. For this, we also centered in on, you can kind of see it in there, our neighborhood boundary. Being a Toronto neighborhood that you could walk about 30 minutes in any direction to get, you get your groceries, your kids might go to school, you might get a coffee, and like those kind of places that are in that 30-minute walkable area. And this is partially because one of the insights we drew is that a community builds based on repeated interactions. And so those sort of things that are within that 30-minute neighborhood walking area are places that you're going to repeat frequently enough that you might be able to build community from them. And then we're not going to get to the mechanisms quite yet, but a lot of the mechanisms that we did identify, they don't force people to do anything. They operate by changing what things mean. I'm going to talk about that in a second with the semiotic triangle. So Clay, I don't know if you're able to zoom in, but we're looking at this sort of part here, which we have as being kind of like the rules. And this semiotic triangle maps the relationship between a word, so such as time, third space, belong, and the concept it activates in your mind, but then also the real world thing that it's trying to do. So the key insight is that this ideology works by recoding the concept, not the word. The word stays the same, but what changes is what's going on in your head when you hear it. So time, for example, under neoliberal capitalism, time activates scarcity, productivity, personal capital, a resource that you have that you allocate to different things. But the caring with side, so that's the mutual reciprocal practice of showing up and giving and getting in return, that community needs to really build, that has a completely different meaning of time because that takes time. It's slow. It's relationship building. You don't build relationships overnight. And that's the caring with triangle on the side. So they're same word, 2 meanings that are kind of incompatible with one another. And we found that the neoliberal capitalism gets to it first. We're always thinking about time and how we can spend it or not spend it. Not so much about how we can slow down and build relationships. We also showed it with third spaces and belong. I'm not going to go into those ones as much, but I think you get the idea of how semiotic triangles we illustrated them in a community sense. I believe next we have Yashar, who's going to talk a little bit more about neoliberal capitalism and its history.
Yeah. So we talked about what is visible, people, what's community, or it's hard to bond with people. But the problem is more than just not participating. It's a deeper ideological system that roots in neoliberal capitalism. If you go to the iceberg, we can actually I'll walk you through the iceberg. You know, in the surface, we see some signs. We see loneliness. We see increasing civic partnership, and decrease in the third places. Basically, creating and maintaining community becomes harder. But if we go one level deeper, we can see and identify some patterns that why these happens. Deregulation, wealth inequality, and consumerism, privatization. So how they are related to these events, all these consumerism, privatization, and all of this stuff, some kind of erode third spaces. Most of them are sold off. The people usually commoditize these third spaces. They want to make money out of them. Online participation goes up, in-person participation goes down, and it is interesting that in this event, the people who join in person are more than the people online. Most of the time, it's vice versa. If we go one level deeper, we can identify some structures, for example, policy, tax policies, bureaucratic reforms, and shareholder primacy. All of these things somehow put pressure on people, work more, to commute to work to other cities to make money. Longer commute, busy works. Actually, it's extracting our personal time, and we cannot add this time to the community. And in the deeper level, the mental model actually is mental model directly relates to neoliberal capitalism, causes all these structure patterns and events that we see. The idea of individualism, a faith in free market, consumerism, this idea that success is something individual. This is the key, that if these ideas become normal, somehow community becomes something that we consume for our benefit, not something that we nourish, or something that we create, build, and work together to make it powerful. So I just want to, if you want to understand that how we came here, we have to go a little bit back in the history. Chloe, if you scroll down in the timeline, I think that you cannot see anything on this map because the font is so small. But the story starts in the 19th century when the classical liberalism starts, the idea of individual freedoms, private property, free market, and all of this stuff. Then the Industrial Revolution happens that accelerates all of those ideas. Work in the local community somehow moves to factories, wages, productivity, competition. And we start to measure time, to sell time, to optimize time. And then we come to World War II. There is no job in the community. Government feels that society needs more support, and welfare investment increases. The government starts investing on housing. The strawberry box housing is the Canadian version of it, that are so-called houses in North York and different parts of Canada. So the idea is society needs support and market stabilization. Up to 1970, that's economic crisis and stagflation, arose this question that government intervention is not working. So this is the start of the neoliberal capitalism thinkers gain power. So start advertising these ideas, which in 1980 leads to Thatcher and Reagan in the United Kingdom and the United States. As you know better than me, deregulation, privatization, and all of this stuff. All these things result to our way of thinking and understanding of time, space, responsibility. At the end, community loses and individual gain, individual profit wins. What we want to think historically, in specifically Toronto's timeline, I will start the story before 1960 when inner city neighborhood exists, people work where they live, people meet and shop in the street. There is a friction between the people everywhere. Somehow Murdoch mysteries time. You can see the vibe in the city, people mingling. After 1960, actually the industrialization happened. The industries forced and pushed out of the cities. So there is people need to commute to go to their work. And as a result, the sources, the money sources, the financial sources that feeding those local community moved away. So this is one of the reasons that at that time the community gets a little bit weaker. In 1990, Ontario decided to change to market-driven planning. Rules to reduce the local support, and all of the development decisions are mostly based on private investment, how much ROI we are gaining through this development. And 1998, amalgamation happened, 6 municipalities become one city, and decision-making for the city went out of the local communities. There is one organization deciding for all this big community. And 2010, platform ecosystem, people start shopping online. They're using less brick and mortar shops. It's reduced the friction of the people. COVID happens again. Those traditional stores market closed off, and in 2023, Toronto became the loneliest city in Canada. Yeah.
The next section, Chloe, we have the object process diagram. Where is that? Oh, it's in the corner. Bottom right corner, yeah. Yeah. We've seen how neoliberal capitalism built the conditions that we're living in, but we want to zoom in on a single resident standing at the moment of deciding whether or not they're going to cross the threshold. They want community, and they actually are going to do something about it. And so that is something throughout we call the obligation threshold. The tool here is the object process diagram, mapping the relationship between the things that exist and the process that transform them. Kind of to set the scene, somebody on your street posts a flyer. There's a neighborhood potluck happening this week. It's free, it's local, it's in person. You see it and you kind of are like, oh, okay, that's interesting. The pull towards it is real. The desire is genuine, but something happens between having that feeling and actually showing up to it. The diagram maps what that something is. Vickers argued that before we act, we perceive, we read the situation, assign a value to it, and decide what's possible. This is an appreciative system, and it's a framework that's running underneath every decision. It shapes what we notice, what we care about, and what feels feasible once we've thought about it. And before you engage with that decision, neoliberal capitalism is already starting to work against you and has shaped that framework. It's got the cynical side and then the autonomy-oriented side. Community is unreliable. Your time is yours. And those aren't necessarily personality traits. That's just how the system has kind of conditioned us to be. So when you either actually sit with the question about whether or not you're going to go, you're running the process there, and it's already been corrupted. So then you default to thin participation. You stay interested, but you never make the commitment. You don't go. You might feel a little bit bad about it, but you tell yourself, oh, maybe next time. And then that creates feedback.
And so then defaulting to this type of thin participation reinforces the states of cynicism and autonomy oriented. The threshold gets harder and harder every time you don't actually cross it. But we have noticed that there is an increasing desire for authentic and genuine connections, and it's not something that you can just like on your phone or scroll or whatever. And that's the crack that we noticed, and it's something we'll come back to in a little bit. But there's something there, it's fragile, and if we don't go quick enough, neoliberal capitalism will just absorb it back in, and we'll just think, oh, that was a pretty event that I went to or that I saw online. So before we get into some of that through our interventions, Chloe, who's online, is going to take us through our comprehensive system map.
Thank you, Victoria. Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, I don't know. I'll turn up our volume. Sure. Chloe, you want to do a little test?
Test, 1, 2, 3.
You're good.
Good, thank you. Okay, so this comprehensive system map explores how community belonging gradually erodes under the condition of contemporary capitalism, and it centers on what we call the fragile obligation threshold. At the heart of the map sits 4 interconnected forces: time as currency, no space to bridge differences, diffusion of responsibility, and digital identity commodification. The first dynamic is time as currency. The time traces how neoliberal capitalism, I'll call it NLC, extract time and promote the optimization of labor. People are working hard just to make ends meet. They lack time and energy. As a result, they begin to see relationship through a lens of efficiency and return. Slowly, transactional interactions replace genuine connection. People don't see value in becoming a villager because it feels costly with no clear short-term benefits. The second dynamic is the lack of spaces to bridge differences. Even though cities like Toronto are dense and diverse, there are very few accessible spaces that support meaningful interaction. Public and semi-public spaces are increasingly commodified. Cafes require purchase, amenities require booking, and many spaces are privatized. At the same time, structural conditions like long winters and limited community infrastructure reduce opportunities for casual, repeated encounters. So while people live close to each other, there is no system that helps them actually connect across differences. The third dynamic is diffusion of responsibility. Because people are busy, disconnected, and lacking shared spaces, no one really feels fully responsible for sustaining community. Everyone expects connections to exist, but assumes someone else will create or maintain it. Over time, this weakens social bonds. Community becomes something people want to receive, but not something they feel able or obligated to contribute. The fourth dynamic is digital identity commodification. Online platforms shape how people present themselves and interact. Social validation metrics such as likes, views, and visibility encourages people to perform and optimize their identity. Connection becomes curated and strategic, rather than spontaneous and authentic. At the same time, digital platforms offer low-effort substitutes for real community, reducing the need to engage in deeper, more demanding relationships. When these four dynamics interact, they reinforce each other and keep people below the fragile obligation threshold. Community does not collapse because people are unwilling. It collapses because time is constrained, space is limited, responsibility is diffused, and connection is increasingly commodified. What is being removed is not desire, but the condition that once made participation feels natural, shared, and sustainable. I'm gonna move to, I'll just zoom out like this. The first four mechanisms we described work on individual. But this one works on the city itself. Before anyone can decide to commit to community, the physical infrastructure that makes the possible has to exist. The physical infrastructure that makes that possible has to exist. In Toronto, it's been removed. Oldenburg calls this third spaces. The informal places between home and work where people run into each other without a plan. A corner cafe, a community garden, or a library reading room could be a third place, the third spaces. These are where community commitment loop actually runs. Repeated encounters build familiarity. Familiarity lowers the received risk of committing. And lower risk means more people cross the obligation threshold. When those spaces convert to higher value commercial uses, the loop doesn't slow down, it stops. And our displacement spiral shows that why it compounds. When long-term residents are displaced, they can defend the spaces they no longer occupy, which makes further conversion easier. The memory eraser bridges capture something important here. The community appears to survive displacements for a while, but relational substrate, the years of accumulated familiarity, is already gone before everyone notices. Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in the world. More than half of residents were born outside Canada. That's a resources. But this is not self-activating. You can see in the comprehensive system map at the center of the board, a cultural friction loop. When there's no neutral ground, language barriers raise anxiety. Anxiety pushes people towards same ethnic networks, and cross-cultural contact declines. Diversity without infrastructure doesn't seem relationship. It becomes parallel solitudes. That dynamic is part of the larger map, not a standalone card, but it doesn't operate in isolation. It compounds everything else. The system doesn't ask too much of people. It removes what would have made the ask feel possible. With that, I'll pass it to Victoria.
Thanks. So we're looking at this monopoly card here, which is the diffusion of responsibility CLD that we created. And Chloe, I don't know if you're able to zoom in on that one, but the idea here is that becoming or actively working towards building community is less when it's shown to be a personal life. The blue one, Chloe. When it's shown to be a personal lifestyle choice rather than something we collectively need to have infrastructure for, there's no responsibility on anybody to act. It just feels like something that you can push off to the next person, sort of like the bystander effect. And this is also something that I've seen where there's the idea of community as a noun, something you have, something you own, versus community as a verb, as something you build that you have to actively participate in. And like I said, the result of kind of this idea of something you have versus something you build is it has residents thinking, oh, you know, it's just somebody else is going to do it. So the CLD shows what happens when a community relies too heavily on other individuals to engage the collective as a whole. And it also incorporates what we call the community activators. Those are people who are actively trying to create spaces or have events or, you know, whatever it might be. And that's kind of a part of who they are. They're trying to activate in the community. So when the community activator animates, the cost of the community participation for the collective reduces. Then it improves the strength of the social commons, so the different spaces that the spaces, both physical, cultural, and social, that they can have. That makes it easier to cross the obligation threshold. I believe is this arrow. And then that increases how many community animators are going to activate, because if it's easier to cross the obligation threshold, more people will hopefully start to become community activators. And that's what we call the community reclamation loop. But there's also the downside of community activators being the only ones to create spaces, because then there's going to be burnout. And that completely undoes everything that those community activators were working towards, because they're just not able to do it anymore. So a successful intervention is something that needs to consider the burnout of these community activators as well as those who are in the community themselves. Just because they've been able to cross the obligation threshold doesn't mean they're immune from all the other factors that are going on in the system.
Go to entrepreneurial self-loop. This is something that I really interested in. It is less obvious if you actually zoom in on. I don't know what one is this. The other one, the entrepreneurial self-loop. Yeah, that one. This is something that it's not so obvious, but I think it's important. Because we try to answer that how the system is shaped, how we believe we are. So we call it entrepreneurial self-loop. It means that the system makes us to feel ourselves not as individuals, but as a business, a brand that needs constantly build, optimize, and improve. So if I want to walk you through this diagram. Start with social media exposure. When social media exposure increases, it's increase the pressure to perform. You feel that you have to post, you have to create content. And when this pressure increases, you start self-branding activities. You start thinking about how I should show myself, how should I present myself in the social media, what I should show to the people from my life. And when this self-branding activity increases, it catches the eye of algorithm. It says that you are creating content, so you deserve more visibility. So it shows you to more people. It shows to you more people. Social validation increase because you receive more likes, more comments, more reposts. So you feel that people liking you more, getting happy. So it's when these feelings grows in you, it's strengthen the entrepreneurial self mindset. You feel that you are a brand and you have to perform. I think most of us sometimes, I feel that a lot. I need to post on LinkedIn. I don't want to. I feel the obligation that I need to do something. It comes from that mindset. My image in social media. So when this mindset is in place, it's feeding again in the loop, the pressure for performance increase, the self-branding increase, you crave more visibility, you get more likes, more comments, and more validation, and it goes on and on and on. And why does it matter for our system? It somehow shape how we relate to others. Instead of seeing ourselves part of the community, we start focused on individual success, on visibility, on performance. For example, if there is an event with neighborhoods, going out with friends, we prefer, or this going to that event competes with posting on social media or doing a course to get a promotion, or even go to networking event to create some job-related, money-related connection instead of dealing with community. We start managing and calculating and connotating interactions. We force we think more about how to present ourselves than connecting with people, getting to know people, think about ourselves. And the most important thing for me is the change in the value system. The social media change our value system. Value becomes something that we can display, display our promotion, display our, I don't know, our house, our car, our new certificate, these are becomes our values because they are easier to show in the social media, but showing connection, participation in the community, friendship is not as easy to show in the social media. All this actually connect to what Victoria said. Showing up is competing with individual interests, individual gains. So this is another reason that participation in the community decline. And I think I created some other psychoanalysis related to social media, and I think these are the things that we can actually critique the decision of some governmental decisions like banning social media for certain ages. Is it a good thing to do, or we can intervene in other areas also? Yeah.
Thank you. I want to just quickly show the actor map, Chloe, which is right here at the bottom. This one here. And this is basically showing who has the power in Toronto when it comes to making changes actors. And you can see this is the high to low on the power, and this is the across for making a relationship change. And I'm curious if anybody sees like a pattern that's emerged right away. Anyone have a comment on it? Basically, the people who are have the highest power are the ones actively holding the system in place, and the people who want to push for change are the people at the lowest power to make that happen. And so we just wanted to kind of show this to show that the power and resistance often travel together. And that's
a couple of those because it's hard to see.
Yeah. So we've got like the province of Ontario, developers, Ontario Land Trust, Platform Corps, employers, BIAs, Toronto Community Housing, the Big Five banks, City of Toronto, academia, residents, neighborhood associations. And this is kind of what neo-capitalism produces, and we're looking at interventions. We knew it couldn't just be top-down structural changes. We have to kind of also work more grassroots in the spaces that exist, and it has to come from both sides. So I'm just going to also talk a little bit about the interventions, which Chloe are on the far right, but I know we're getting close to time, so I'm not going to go too deep into this. But like I mentioned, one of the insights when we were looking at interventions was that people want to have community, and they're expressing this on the very platforms that kind of are stopping them from finding community. And we really focused on in-person, sort of those like neighborhoods communities. Obviously, there are also lots of many online communities that people are a part of, and those are very valuable as well. But we really wanted to focus, how do you get somebody to make those steps towards building a community in their, like, where they live. And so this desire shows a crack in the system at the value judgment level. People are seeking these things on the very platforms that are stopping them from doing so. So let me see what else I wanted to talk about. So we had 3 layers when it came to our intervention. We had the physical layer. We called our sort of intervention in commons. It was a platform. It was a not-for-profit platform that supported both community animators and those in the community in a progressive pathway, so that they could start with the smallest step, even just looking, saying hi to somebody, saying hi to your crossing guard, that kind of thing. You start with a small step, you start to get bigger, and maybe eventually you're starting to host events. That brings you into that community animators pathway, and this is also an opportunity for community animators to participate. So the physical layer that the in commons sort of supports but can't directly support is finding space. That's going to need policy. It's going to be need to come in at a higher level. But what it does help show is people who are trying to find spaces can kind of voice that this is really hard to do. This is really hard to find. It's expensive, whatever that might be. And it brings people together who can share resources to find these third spaces. And it creates a civic infrastructure to advocate for more space around their community. There's the relational layer, which is based on the idea that trust requires repeated interactions. With repeated interactions need the physical layer of places for people to gather in order to build those repeated interactions for trust. But the progression pathway, the small baby steps, allow people to attend, contribute, host, and keep those stakes low, and they're able to kind of build up those repeated interactions as they see fit. And then there's the cognitive layer, which we're trying to show time being reframed. We were talking about time being a commodity as a resource, but we want this to show people that time is worth giving to others. So your neighbor needs some salt. They post on this thing, easy enough to take a little bag of salt. And showing that that little time given is going to bring back rewards in other ways. And there's some things that it can't do. It's not going to solve neoliberal capitalism, but it can help make small changes towards the physical, the relational, and the cognitive spaces. And I think if you take one thing away from this is think about how you can make that one small step towards actively building your community as a verb, versus seeing community as something that you just have and you just deserve. Everybody deserves community, but you have to actively work towards it. So like, what are those small steps that you can take tomorrow, today, when you get home to make that step towards the obligation threshold? Yes.
Thank you for sharing. Let's have some time. I think we have like 10-ish minutes, 12 minutes for any questions, discussion points. Sure.
I'm curious to know if you can tell us more about your research process to put this together. I know it's a bit outside of like what we're talking about. I'm just curious to see your process.
This is a good question. Actually, we are people. Dina is not with us today. She have research. You know, we divided the community in 5 areas. I have done social media section. Dina done the history part and all of this stuff. And each person actually take over one area and go deep in it, and we bring back all of this information and try to create some kind of story, connect these areas to each other. There are lots of artifacts and lots of research that we didn't include it in our synthesis map, because we tried actually to make a cohesive story and show the most tangible and most related reasons for the problem.
We also, the first assignment that we had was to create a dossier of artifacts. And so we were assigned a group before that. That was an individual assignment, but we were assigned a group before that. So like Yashar said, we decided that each person would kind of take an area of this topic and research it for our individual assignment. So we ended up with all of these artifacts per person, and then kind of like, merged and edited and finessed from there. We also did the map the system competition. And so even from this final assignment to us submitting that, a lot even changed, because we were getting new insights. And I think because this is something we're all living in the moment, it's like constantly changing. There's so much that I feel like I've learned. And so we're researching both from like our own lives and then also from all that we could online.
Roxanne has her hand up. Yeah.
I think one thing we also did was a lot of social media scanning, and we started to realize that we were seeing over and over again this concept of people expressing this desire online for something real, something tangible, some kind of community, but then not knowing how to pursue that. So they see it, but they didn't know what that first step to take were, or I think a lot of people, especially maybe Gen Z and younger, they've grown up, they're so like natively enmeshed with social media and cell phones that they don't really feel comfortable making that first gesture in person a lot of times. So like even that hello to your crossing guard, like Victoria mentioned, can be really challenging. So we kept seeing that. And then we started doing a little bit of intentional scanning online, like looking through Reddit and collecting quotes and mentions where people are expressing this desire, and started collecting those to kind of see that this wasn't just us noticing, it is an actual phenomenon going on, this desire for analog connection.
We didn't zoom in on it on the map, but if you look at the Monopoly money, each one has a quote that we pulled from different social media platforms.
Well, Helena, and then we'll go to Zach after.
So thank you for this. In your analysis, did you find that there was a need for people to find community with common values? Because having the same neighborhood, same age group or whatever is not a good proxy for values.
Yeah, and I think this was something that in particular, Chloe touched on in some of her research, and I don't know that it all got brought into this map. She was saying that, actually, Chloe, I don't know if you want to share what you found in your research about cultural groups when you were looking at you even living in these like high density areas. Or Roxanne, I think you maybe had done some work on that too.
Yeah, I can probably answer some of that, but I barely hear the audio. Could you please repeat that question again? Who was that?
Did your analysis find that people need common values to create community?
Yes. If that's referring to the diversity and different ethics coming along together, it's also based on the research, but more for my personal experience as well. As an immigrant in Canada, pretty recently immigrated, but it's really hard for me to personally find a community that I can be in, and even I go into that community, I feel like I'm kind of like rejecting for some reason. Like, for example, I went to a Chinese community, but even though we look the same, but for some reason, I was not really inviting to that environment. So based on that, I started from there. So what really makes this a little bit of differentiate between humans, I'll say, even though we live in the same city and we share a lot of things, but really makes a difference. So I started from there, and I noticed that it's definitely coming from the ethics, languages for sure, and cultural differences, and a lot of histories behind as well. So yeah.
And I think one insight we brought was about we came back to third spaces. We need spaces where people of similar values, similar cultures, and cross-culturally and cross-values can convene and can gather to have these conversations. And we honestly just kept coming back to third spaces, third spaces, third spaces. Yeah.
Roxanne wants to add something, I think.
Yeah, I think this one is a little bit tough to answer because a lot of it focuses in on how you are defining community, and that's something we struggled with at the beginning of this project is how exactly are we going to define it? So for our purposes, we really put a spatial boundary around it rather than a values-driven boundary, because we really wanted to look at how people create connection around with that 30-minute sort of boundary around where they live. So there are affinity communities, like you can go, we looked at Meetup, that app called Meetup, where you can go and you can meet up with people who you share an interest or a value with, but those are also monetized. Like there's a certain transactional aspect to that kind of community now when it's facilitated by an app. So especially when we were looking at intervention, we wanted to try and sidestep that as much as possible and not monetize it. So again, that's why we focused on that parameter around where you live, because people generally, and this is another thing we ran into with people not being able to afford to stay and and especially renters moving around a lot. But when you live in a community, if you're there for long enough, oftentimes people will develop a shared value around caring for that community and just your shared spaces together. So that connects again back to what Victoria said about the third spaces.
Oh, Zach and then Arjun.
Hello, thank you for that amazing first synthesis map presentation. It was really well done. And the question that I have is what I thought of as you were doing the presentation was just the concept of the social contract. And I'm curious of how much that has come up in your research and what you found on that at all.
Can you elaborate a bit on what you mean by social contract?
So what I am aware of, or how I've heard it defined is, it's just like the agreement that everyone in a society has with everyone else in the society. So it's like you don't break the law, you pay your taxes, stuff like that. Just like basic ground rules that everyone follows.
I don't think this came up too much in our research. I think it just wasn't an area that we explored. I'm not sure if anybody else has any thoughts on it.
Not specifically, you are right, Victoria. We haven't encountered a lot of them. But I can translate your question in different way. That the culture in different communities makes how people actually create that community. So if we translate the culture in that specific community as a social contract between those individuals, yes, we see that. The people in different areas of the different neighborhoods using different methods, different systems to create their communities. But in the terms of that general one city social contract, they haven't encountered such a thing.
Roxanne?
We focused on that, but in a very micro way. And that's sort of what the obligation threshold piece was to me. The example that I like to give, and I experience this where I live, is in the wintertime, sometimes my neighbors will shovel the snow in front of my house. Super nice of them. But then I feel obligated to return that kindness, right? And it's not a negative obligation, but it is that sort of social contract where someone does something nice for you, you want to return the favor. So that's what we were looking at. And it was just on that micro scale, I think.
I see.
Okay, so we'll go Arjun, I think last question, and then we'll go to the second.
So my questions around reframing. So I kind of really liked how you looked at communities and lonely people. And my question is, if we were to reframe communities as a big organization and the lonely person as employees who are not seen or acknowledged, what parts of the systems map do you keep and what parts of the system map would you take out?
Oh, that's a good question. Chloe, Roxanne, did you hear that question?
It was a little hard to hear. Maybe you can repeat it one time.
Loud something happening. Would you mind, sorry, repeating it again?
Yes. So
turn up the volume on Arjun.
Yeah.
Okay. My question is around reframing. The systems map that you showed focused on communities and lonely people. So if we were to reframe communities as a big organization and lonely people as probably employees who are not seen or acknowledged, what parts of the systems map would you keep? And what parts of the systems map would you probably take out?
I think there's probably a lot that we could keep. I think that there's like even time, the way time is framed in terms of the way businesses think of it and then the way an individual thinks about it are going to be very different. I think of time tracking, just like off the top of my head, being very different meanings for the individual who's actually doing it and the way that the organization is using it. So I haven't thought about it too much, but I feel like there's quite a few applicable pieces there. I also think that often with different employee groups, they're trying to build their idea of community rather than the idea of community that the individuals who work for the company actually want and need. And
And the onus is sometimes on those individuals to do that, and sometimes it's on the organizations to create these communities. But are they just, is it just pizza on a table on Fridays? Is that really going to just build community within your organization? I'm not sure. So I think there's a lot to be learned from this, but that's just kind of my top of mind thoughts.
Yeah, actually, there is a really fundamental difference between the community and organization, because the motive behind why people wants to connect with each other is so different here. That loneliness, that's a need to actually talk with your neighbor, be a part of community is different. But in the organization, I feel that there is that capitalism, that incentives that you want to get promotion, you earn more money, it's more capitalistic environment. So I feel the motives are so different. If I want to look at whole story in this setup, definitely I will keep the entrepreneurial self-love. It describes a lots of interactions in the workplace, not in the sense that they want to build a community. Everyone hates team building activities in organizations, but in the sense that if you participate in this activity or get close to this person, you will get more promotion. You will, that's a kind of capitalistic motivation in there. But in a community, actually, this is the problem. That motivation, that neoliberal, and that motivation kills the community. What we see in our system, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking even the diffusion for responsibility CLD that we did, like an individual at a company might think that it's the job of the culture person to build this community, or it's the job of the CEO. Like, why should I have to put that effort in? But as individual employees, if you want to build a true community, you're going to have to actually make that effort. And also even thinking about our other CLD, which was about bridging differences. If you're not, if say you do have employee resource groups and those groups aren't necessarily collaborating and working together, then you're just building, silos of these types of groups when there might be intersectionality there too. So I think that there's a lot of applications.
Yeah, we can actually commoditize this model and sell it to organization, how to build the community without team building activities. Yeah, Roxanne?
Yeah, real quick, I'm sure we're getting close to time. So what Victoria just said made me think about one thing that I think those two systems and organization and the community would have in common. Victoria said sometimes they think it's up to the like community committee or the event committee at work to take care of all those things. And a lot of times it's women who are doing that work, and it's also unpaid work. And that's something we also saw in this research, that a lot of the time the community activators are also women who are doing a lot of this unpaid care type labor for caring for community, caring for family, etc. And it can lead to burnout really quickly because it's a lot of mental effort and emotional effort. So I think that's definitely a commonality that I've seen there.
Okay, Zach, I'm sorry, we got to go on to the next presentation, but you can drop your question in the chat.
I had a comment on what Roxanne just said, a very short one.
Okay, sure, Zach.
So I'm part of a group called Toastmasters, and Toastmasters has to self-organize. So the affinity groups that I don't remember your name, the gentleman mentioned it, but those groups themselves have to like organize and take care of themselves, and that community effort needs to come in. And if it doesn't, then those affinity groups as a way to build community will also die out and not be available as a means for how people could connect even beyond third spaces.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach, and thank you for the question, Arch. And that's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. It was great food for thought. Yeah,
awesome. Well done. Thank you, team Village people, and wonderful map, wonderful discussion. So next up we have Carl. Carl's presenting from a map the system assignment, and I'm gonna let him explain how that's different than the synthesis map before he jumps in.
Sure. So Map the System was about choosing a social or environmental challenge, basically researching it, going in depth and mapping that system out. So I don't know if that's.
What will we see that's different than what we saw in the previous team?
I mean, it's a little similar. I mean, so it's more of like a slide deck. But I do definitely have a lot of diagrams, and I go a bit more in depth of like, mechanisms of how this system operates, or how at least I understand it. Awesome.
Cool. So that's the difference between this map.
Yeah, this was an extracurricular.
Take it away, Carl.
Thank you. So I call my project 0 Feet Away, Intimate Infrastructures and the Chemsex Syndemic. You know, it all makes sense showing it properly. So I'll be going over the problematical situation. I'll be going over some terminology to help you become acquainted to this system. I'm going to the intimate infrastructures, explain what chemsex is and the associated health risks. Explain what a syndemic is if you're not familiar. Then I will present the system map and the 3 subsystems I've sort of segmented, and then go into the scale and speed at which this system I believe is growing, and some closing thoughts. So the problematical situation of this system is observed at being at the intersection of online connections, substance use, and sex, specifically for men who sleep with men, so most often referred to as gay men, but it's a broader term. And we're looking at the specific sexual health and mental health risks that this provides. So in simple terms, it's basically online dating for men who sleep with men, but they are looking for sex and also crystal meth use. So that's what chemsex is. And it's become somewhat of a subculture around the world. So there's a reinforcing interplay of this system, and it's really about finding partners online and those who engage in chemsex. It's very much a lot of activity in these online platforms. So for terminology, you'll hear me say men who sleep with men. It'll be written as MSM often. In many research articles, they call it GBMSM, which is gay, bi, and other men who sleep with men. But for this project, this is sort of the catch-all to keep it simple and capture that nuance. You might see SDU, which is sexualized drug use, but this system is specifically looking at chemsex as a form of sexualized drug use. So it's a pairing of crystal meth use and sex between men. Yeah.
Is it only crystal meth or other drugs?
So sexualized drug use is more of a broad term, which can capture more. Like some people include alcohol as far as sexualized drug use, but chemsex in particular is associated with crystal meth. But they use other drugs like poppers and some other things as well. And geosocial applications, I might call them geosexual applications, but it's really just the online dating platforms. And intimate infrastructures is a term I really liked that I found in a research article, and it kind of captures these online dating platforms and that experience. These are 6 very popular geosocial, geosexual applications. Hinge, Tinder, and Field, the ones at the bottom, are more focused on long-term dating, serious dating, whereas Grindr, Sniffies, and Scruff are geared towards meeting for sex or shorter encounters, more expedited encounters. They also can support more like anonymous meeting, and whereas Hinge, Tinder, and Field, you're a bit more like your identity is really clear. But for this system, I will be focusing on Grindr, as it is the most prolific one. It's very prominent and very centered in gay culture. So Grindr was launched in 2009 and became a publicly traded company in 2022. In 2025, Grindr averaged 50 million monthly active users. In 2024, the company was valued at $3.8 billion.
That same year, its revenue was $344.6 million. And this past year, its revenue was $439.9 million. So that's a 28% year-over-year revenue increase. So I bring this to show you the scale of this application and how it is slowly, or rapidly increasing in investment.
Is it a publicly traded company?
It is, yes, since 2022.
What is their revenue model? Do you know?
Yeah, so they have subscriptions. So they do have a paywall, but they also advertisers. So that are, and I will go into that. That's part of the system lens. But just speaking with the addictive design of an app like Grindr, it leverages similar things to other online dating apps like gamification and vanity metrics. So these are features that keep people on the applications. Maybe someone likes your profile, shares a photo with you, you feel good, but it doesn't really translate to anything. There's also a sense of immediacy and this fear of missing out, part of this application in particular. This is a screenshot of the Grindr grid, as they call it. So you'll have a number of profiles of users who are nearest to you. So as you're going from place to place, new users will show up, others will leave, you'll show up on other people's grids. So there's a sense of urgency to open the application and check to see who's around. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, is the screenshot real as far as you know, or is it marketing from the company?
This one was a marketing shot. Right. And it's like a little older, so it's kind of changed, but it's the same format essentially. And there's more features now. Yeah, these are not real profiles to my knowledge.
Less real now.
Yeah, exactly. There's an interesting Toronto study that surveyed men who sleep with men in 2018 and wanted to understand how they're meeting sexual partners, their willingness to travel, and a lot of their details. And an average of over 70% of the people surveyed found sexual partners through online dating applications. Nearly a third of respondents indicated that they met over 90% of their sexual partners using online dating applications. And the average distance traveled to meet a prospective partner was 3.2 kilometers, while the median distance was 1.2 kilometers. So it's really showing that people value this convenience, value this close proximity. So an app like Grindr is really facilitating that value. Now moving on to chemsex. So chemsex is a form of sexualized drug use. Like I mentioned before, it's most often linked to crystal meth use. Chemsex is actually the term most used in Europe. In Canada and the US, it's more commonly called party and play, PNP. In parts of Asia, they call it high fun. I'm using chemsex as in the literature, they tend to use that term, and I find it's a bit more of an accessible term. There's an article I stumbled upon by this writer, and I think he's a journalist, but he himself has engaged in chemsex, and he does a really good job of illustrating the human element of how people even access chemsex. So this quote here says, "Discard the images of anti-drug PSAs where sketchy men pull up in unmarked cars offering illicit substances. Instead, you're naked, imbibed on drinks and hormones, and in the warmth and safety of someone's bed. Here the risks feel softer, the edges dulled." And this really resonated with me because he describes a story of going out at night to a club with a bunch of friends. They go to an after party, meet someone he's really attracted to, gets in bed with them, and they introduce him to crystal meth. And so through that experience, you might trust this person, you trust their friends. They might have a nice condo, they might have a big fancy bed, like all these things kind of normalize this experience. And so a lot of people end up in that position through these types of kind of the normalization of the subculture. And they might not even know what meth is to begin with as well. There are a number of mental health risks associated with using crystal meth. Chronic meth users have deficits in memory, executive functioning, as well as higher rates of anxiety, depression, and most notably psychosis. Something called meth-induced psychosis, where people get severely paranoid, experience delusions, hallucinations, So that obviously affects your relationships with peers, friends, family, landlords, employers. So there's like a spiral element to using crystal meth. And when you're using it and also having sex with people, there are sexual health risks. Your sexual decision-making is wildly impaired, so you might engage in riskier sexual behaviors. And already queer men are disproportionately affected by STIs and HIV. So a quick stat here from 2022, 42.1% of new cases of HIV infections in Canada were among men who sleep. So like I just said, men who sleep with men are disproportionately represented among most STIs. The Toronto Public Health Report, over the course of 5 years, they determined that men who sleep with men represented 59% of HIV cases, 21% of chlamydia cases, 55% of gonorrhea cases, 74% of infectious syphilis cases, despite being a fraction of the general population. And then we have men who sleep with men living with HIV are disproportionately engaging in chemsex. And linking this to causality is a little difficult, but the literature points to 2 common scenarios. The first one being people who are diagnosed with a new HIV infection. To relieve stress, they might end up engaging in chemsex and meth use and any other drug use. And the other situation is while they're high on crystal meth, they're less likely to adhere to medication preventing the spread of HIV. So if you are HIV positive and you're engaging in crystal meth use, you might not be adhering to your meds. And similar for people who are not HIV positive, there's a drug called PrEP that people take daily to prevent acquiring HIV. So it kind of goes both ways. So there's a causality here. There's a research study in Madrid that surveyed men who sleep with men who are HIV positive and do engage in chemsex. And they found that 88% of them utilize geosocial applications to find prospective partners. So it kind of highlights this connection between expedited access to find people. And also just to explain briefly, on these applications, people use coded languages to communicate. They'll often use the party emoji, like that little emoji with the, as a way in Mexico, they use the ice cube in different places. So it's really easy to communicate this is what you're on. It's also called Tina, and people use capital T's in certain words. So there's ways of flagging it, and it doesn't seem like these applications are really intervening, or at least an application like Grindr. This was a causal loop diagram that I created that I thought captured well this experience. So if we look at someone who has a desire for connection, maybe they're freshly out, they want to explore their sexuality, they're sexually curious, they end up on the online applications and they engage in new sexual behaviors that reinforces their sex drive and curiosity. They continue to be on the online apps. Then they want to develop a further sense of belonging, and maybe they're offered meth use and drug use between people as a form of social bonding. It's that ritual, so they feel a further sense of belonging. And when you are on crystal meth, it is an upper, and it's known to enhance sensations, lower your inhibitions, and they really describe it as a very blissful, euphoric experience, which makes it obviously very addictive. And so when they are pairing it with sex, again, that sexual decision-making might lead them to riskier sexual behaviors, could lead to further stress if they contract HIV, they get some STIs. Then they might go back to using meth, damage to their mental health, deteriorated relationships, lose your job, further isolated, further stressed, further need for desire to connection. So it's kind of this, they get trapped in this cycle. Now speaking to the syndemic, syndemic is a term that merges 2 words, synergies and epidemic. A most common example is the recent COVID-19 pandemic, which disproportionately affected people of color and low-income groups. So syndemic understands the social structure components that affect disease clustering within certain groups. So for the Chemsex Syndemic, we're looking at men who sleep with men who have these challenges related to their mental health already, substance use and sexual health risks that are already present, and they kind of reinforce each other. But then these social structures aggravate them, intensify them, kind of keep them in these circumstances. Things like social stigma, discrimination, intergenerational trauma from the AIDS crisis, activist fatigue, minority stress, and inequitable access to care, just to name a few. So yeah, it's intensifying and exacerbating existing problems. So for my system, these are the three key issue holder groups that I've identified and tried to bound my system using. So it's men who sleep with men, geosocial application companies, and clinical and community-based health organizations. And my system is a platform socio-technical system, which I learned in the systems thinking class last semester. And I find it really interesting because we're looking at how technology is impacting human behavior and the feedback that's being exchanged. So the app is developing features that accommodate learning from that, and they keep adjusting, but also this app affecting and manipulating the culture in many ways. So it's that exchange. And we made it to the system map. This is an actants map. So in teal or green, we have the human actants. In yellow, you have the digital actants. In red, we have the biological risk actants. And in blue, you have the service actants. I'll make a bit more sense as I break it down into the three subsystems. So the first one being the capitalist drivers, which we were talking about earlier. So I found this as an interesting, like the influence that investors now have in the pressure for this application to monetize off its users, I think is a really important component. We have this revenue and value mechanism. So shareholders are investing in the application or the company is providing returns for shareholders while users are contributing their data and their money, and Grindr is providing that convenience. So at the core, there's this pressure, and people using the application are often forgetting about this side of things. And the way the app is designed is really meant to monetize off its usership. A system paradox that I noticed from this angle as well is that because this company is so big, they have a lot of power to influence government. They have a government affairs arm, so they are trying to help advance human rights, because if their user base don't have rights, they don't have a user base. And then at the same time, they're trying to support them. They're also manipulating them. They're monetizing off of them, and they're setting arguably unhealthy norms of how to relate to one another. The second subsystem is at the heart. So this is the core of how the system operates. So we're looking at men sleeping with men, engaging in crystal meth, their exposure to sexual health risks, and how Grindr kind of comes into the picture. I created this diagram, which I call the heart effect. Sits at the heart of the system. And it's meant to mimic a bit of the heart, and that kind of happened naturally. And so if we look at the top, we have these drivers for seeking connections. So say someone comes out later in life, they have lacked conventional and normal romantic and sexual experiences growing up in the world. So suddenly they're primed to explore their sexuality, experiment. So these things can bring them into the online space to connect with people. So that sort of acts as a trigger. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the hook cycle, which is a design idea that is coined by Nir Eyal. And it's basically design elements to keep people hooked on the mobile application. So you have a trigger, so something that brings you onto the application. Then you have an action, so say you message someone on Grindr. Then you have a reward, someone responds to you, you get some photos, you're now invested because you have a lot of conversations going. So when you leave the application, you're thinking of these people and you're going back to it. So it kind of keeps you in this cycle. And what I found interesting is when I was mapping this out, I also looked at the substance addiction cycle, and that also has a trigger and a reward. So if people are using while engaging on these applications, there's this like co-occurring compounding effect of kind of staying on and feeling that like just being more addicted anyways. And then finally at the bottom, so yeah, those are the pressure points, and you have validation, soothing, and reassurance, which are psychological effects of sexual connection, but also those are things that you get from feeling validated, being on an application, people messaging you, and also engaging in drugs. And finally, we have the third subsystem, which is the health support network. So we have health professionals, clinical and community-based organizations, delivering harm reduction in person and online, and also mental health services and medical treatments to deal with the STIs and HIV. I applied it to the Toronto network, and what I found interesting is how many specific organizations there are that help very niche groups of people. So for example, we have the Black Coalition for AIDS Prevention, you have the South Asian Alliance for AIDS Prevention. And this really ties in that syndemic narrative that ties race and class inequality as part of the exacerbation of this system. And yeah, it's just a very diverse group, and it makes it difficult to have a one-size-fits-all solution. It just adds to that complexity. So when we talk about the scale and speed, something that's fairly recent are these new AI features that they're adding to Grindr. They're actually trying to make Grindr an AI native company. So everything will be built off of artificial intelligence. And to me, it feels really silly because AI is meant to solve a problem, and there's not really a problem to solve when you're including this. And it's just kind of scary how much data they actually have human behavior around the world specific to this marginalized group already. But the credit I will give to them is that they call it gay eye. You can't not, but they did trademark it. But yeah, they have some crazy features that they're rolling out, but it is behind a strong paywall. The decline of queer geographies is actually what kind of got me to where I got with this presentation. This is sort of where I started, and I thought I would be going more in depth. And so we're talking about the gentrification of our cities and the gentrification of queer neighborhoods. I don't know if many of you have been to Toronto's Gay Village, but the top photo with the yellow star is an existing tower that's now towering over the village. And the village is very low to mid-rise development. So it's a very community, it's very simple, I guess you can call it. And the red star was a proposed development that fortunately was canceled, but that was a 48-story building that was meant to be smack in the middle of the village. It just really has no place. It's very jarring when you look at how tall it is and how small the village is. But if things like this did happen more, what might that mean for queer people who are now leaving the spaces, queer geographies disappearing? Are people then going to be going more online, becoming more reliant on these online spaces? And then there are obviously the risks of these online spaces. There's a youth risk factor. So LGBTQIA+ youth make up between 25% and 40% of homeless youth in Canada already. So if these young people are entering these online spaces, what does that mean for them as a higher risk group? And there's a research study that found that younger gay men in particular expressed a sense of containment in the sexual market like fields created by gay geosocial applications. So they already feel kind of trapped, and they're not as familiar with common queer spaces. But, yeah.
You say, what does a sense of containment suggest from the study?
Like if they want to make connections with people, the way to do that would need to be online to do that.
So it could be kind of mixed in terms of connotations, like I can do it, it works. I'm aware it's not as open.
I think I understand.
Like, what's the value judgment, or is there no value judgment in that sense of containment?
So I think they just feel a bit trapped with how they're meant to connect with people. If other young people aren't going to these places in person, they're kind of they're really reliant on online spaces to form connections.
So it's not routine lock-in tech. It's not just tech lock-in. It's
By fields in that sentence, do you mean database field or space in the city?
These are like the sexual market like fields is more just environments to
spaces.
Yeah, spaces and often like online platforms is like part of that as well.
Did you, I know it's Toronto focused, but did you look at urban versus regional
A little
impacts?
bit. So that other Toronto study I mentioned earlier, it did look at more of like the greater Toronto area. So not so much like rural, but more suburban communities, and they did understand behaviors of what people did. And often people go from suburban to urban to connect.
The reason why I'm asking is I know that there are some pockets in Sudbury and North Bay, etc., that are having a lot of drug use and stuff like that. I wonder if they're the micro hubs, so I just call it that way.
Yeah, so for example, like the chemsex, like I gave that Madrid example, it's really everywhere. It's just a common, like it's a subculture essentially. And it's really accessible, right? Because I could go to Mexico City, I could go to Chicago, and I could just open the application and find people who engage in chemsex, like very fast. And a lot of these people who are online are like ready to meet and ready to go. So yeah, there are pockets, but they all have similar problems. I think in larger areas, it's obviously a bit more common.
So I think you talked about the entry point of men who have sex with men, maybe getting onto Grindr and then starting to get into drugs because of that. Is there any people who are into drugs who know that they could get drugs through this pathway, that they're entering that way, and then they're like, you know, if I can get, I maybe wasn't interested necessarily in men, but now I'm going to for the drug part?
Totally. Yeah, like people go to go to Mexico City, they're going for a festival, they want maybe not meth, but they want other drugs. They can connect with people. So on those applications with the grid, you can directly message people. It's barrier free essentially. So you could just try your luck on all these people and they just block you if they're not interested. But yeah, it's not, these apps are not exclusive to sex. They're mostly designed to accommodate that and facilitate that, but people can network professionally. You can make friends. You can, like, they're used in many ways, but sex is sort of at the forefront of these applications. In terms of a leverage point, I think there's something to be further explored through the harm reduction digital campaigns. My friend worked for AIDS Committee of Toronto, and they would create profiles meant to address chemsex in these applications. So they go in, see the coded language profiles, message them, provide them with resources. But the issue is that they would get reported for being spam or they'd get blocked, and then the profiles would be deleted. So that's where the application itself needs to be doing something a bit more to intervene, in my opinion. However, when we speak of wicked problems, at the end of the day, it is just people who are looking to seek connections and feel worthy. So you could do all this work for harm reduction, but at the end, at the core, there are people who don't feel good about themselves, have been marginalized, and end up in marginalized spaces. So I'll end with this one quote. It was through the Gay Men's Sexual Health Alliance, a YouTube series. It's very good. It's for people who have engaged in chemsex and other people who witnessed it, and harm reduction workers who've worked with people who engage in chemsex. And he says, if you can recognize that anybody can get sucked into this kind of stuff, you're far more likely to recognize your own vulnerabilities. And that is sort of why I called it 0 feet away. If you are in the same room as someone, or you're in like the same club and you open the app, it'll show that they're 0 feet away. And so there's just like proximity that it's like this lingering thing that you don't always see, but it's kind of always there. And I think it's an important reminder, and it kind of like hits home in a way of just, I don't even know my own vulnerabilities. Like if I did end up trying it just once, really drunk, I don't know where I would be. And this is a common thing that happens to people. And yeah, that is all. Thank you so much.
Very well done. Thank you, Carl, so much. Yeah. Questions, comments? Yes.
This is very well done. I have sort of 2 comments and 2.5. in terms of the map the system, I think it's interesting to me that the end part of it is probably where actually I would have started. And it would probably connect the story a little bit better, but that's like that half comment. What strikes me, and I think judging by the comments that were coming through the presentation, that it's a topic of interest and probably less known to people outside of the communities. I would probably encourage you to, because you started with chemsex as a subculture, and I sense that there are multiple subcultures that are very interesting to explore. I think it would be very, very interesting to explore as part of whatever courses or like your own personal interest to actually do the subculture work. So I think there's a lot of interesting pieces that might be coming out and then can be used for all these different actors that may be coming up with interventions. I think that would be a very, very interesting piece. And I would want us to go down that road a little bit more because I would be curious to learn more. But then you start going somewhere else. And I'm like, okay, so that's one. So super well done on that set, in that sense, and very interesting area, and I think an important area. The second part is it also somewhere along the way, I think I started, you kind of started commenting a little bit around the chemsex subculture, but also the damages that it does. And I think there's another stream that kind of almost like, I almost see the three projects that were coming together in this presentation, and they are interested to move apart. Yeah, if you sounds like it's
narrowed in a bit.
Interest of you take on and continue on because there are a lot of interesting pieces and really break down what subculture is, kind of like the common for what the definition of community and like norms, language, rituals, and what that means, and it actually might unpack quite powerful insights in the system. And then if you want, you can throw the Grindr into it, because I think that's like a whole entire other thing. So very well done. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Got
know.
a lot of interest.
Yeah, I feel like if I start with the map, there's just so much to like explain it. So I feel like I have to give so much background because it is such like a niche topic. And that I did have trouble like kind of figuring out which aspect of the system, because I could also have looked at law enforcement and how that navigates into the system. And
because to me that problematic maybe, and I don't know if it is necessarily problematic, but it's a thing to inquire about, is then around the drug addiction and sexualization of the app and things of that nature. That's, I think, that's why I say in the end for me, the last two things that you touched upon, that that's the thing that you investigated probably, and that might have been an interesting way for the systems. I think that would call Dave who says, "What's your system in focus?" But that's like an entire different conversation. But I do see like 2 or 3 stories that are quite interesting. It's less about map the system as a contest. It's more about there are like 3 stories that is interesting to unpack.
We'll go Roxanne, Arjun, Elena.
Yeah, a really good presentation. This was so interesting. I was just noticing the definite overlaps between some of the themes in your presentation and our presentation, and how when people are seeking connection, how platforms and apps can take away all the friction involved in seeking and finding that connection, which makes it easier for people. However, it always seems like there is that flip side that really corrupts that connection and leads to potentially really negative outcomes. So that's something really interesting just to think about, is how the removal of friction on one end creates these or can create these negative results on the other end. So more of a comment than a question.
To add to that, I think a lot of queer spaces are very much sexualized. People rely on nightlife to interact. Fortunately, there are other communities. Like I play in a fairly large gay soccer league in Toronto. We have 10 teams. There's over 200 players in it. And those spaces aren't as sexualized because we actually have an activity to do and share. And it's more about the sport, and it feels more actually community driven than sex.
Arjun.
So my question's around leverage points. So I'm just curious, like, would Grindr have some sort of a financial incentive to bring mental health coaches and therapists as part of to make sure that people are a little more healthy?
Yeah, so they do have like campaigns. It's like a company. I think it's called Freddy's, and they do have ads that are meant to direct people to like drugs like PrEP that help prevent the spread of HIV. But it's always like these specific companies. And at the end of the day, I think what I always remember is that they want people to be staying on the application. So while sure they want people to be healthy, but if people are using it to find drugs and they're staying on it and they're paying subscriptions to be on it, why would they really interfere with that? But they do provide resources. So that does exist. It's just like the intention behind that I'm a bit more skeptical.
Elena and then Francesca.
So thanks for this. When I was queer in the 1990s, we didn't have Grindr, we didn't have online dating, right? I believe crystal meth, I just looked it up, crystal meth started being a gay thing in the late 90s. So I want to know if you did any statistical thinking or probabilistic thinking about in your system, is it the online apps that are increasing use of crystal meth, or is it just, it's a thing, it's a popular, drugs are a popular thing in gay sex culture?
Yeah, I don't think the apps are the cause for it, but they're definitely exacerbating it. And I think it's how fast you can find it, and how easily you can find it. Like for the apps, if you did want to do that, you would have to meet someone, and you would have to go out and do that. So I feel there are more barriers and there's more friction to get to that point. Whereas that friction is non-existent now. It's like you could not. What's that? Sorry.
Just DoorDash it. Sorry, I'm just.
Pretty
much. It is an easy entry point. I think that's what.
Yeah, it's like an entry point for.
Entry point.
That's what makes me think of these youth who are new to it, and like I actually have a couple friends who've done it on accident. They thought it was weed. They thought it was just a pipe with marijuana, and they ended up doing that by accident. It's like a lot of people don't inform each other, and a lot of people who are doing chemsex, like they're not kind of like ashamed of it in many ways, so they're happy to pass it on, and they want to have that sense of belonging. They don't want to do it on their own. They want to have that ritual with other people. At least that's how I understand it.
Sorry, are you building on this conversation? Yeah.
No, I just think it's interesting. Yeah, and I was thinking when you said the youth, like, yeah, without their comfortability going out to these spaces, then they're going to rely more heavily on these apps.
Jessica.
Thank you for giving me confidence to do a systems map without, not that you don't have graphic skills, you have wonderful graphic skills, but I feel encouraged to do something like this as well. It's like a wonderful story that you told from A to Z. It was like a little documentary in a night. So thank you for that. And very well designed. Sorry, I didn't by no means mean to imply, it just made me feel comfortable. But my question for you was going to be, at the end you said the applications, i.e. Grindr, need to do more for harm reduction. But to your earlier point and to your question, there is no interest for those network effect applications to reduce eyeballs.
Right.
Do you have, maybe this was not part of your research, but do you have any suggestion or ideas how to balance this polarity of providing harm reduction while keeping people on the platform?
Yeah, I think Grindr could be partnering with more like local organizations to also understand the local dynamics that exist for people who are engaging in chemsex. But yeah, I think it's like these conflicting energies, and they still want to have the control of these applications. And also the government doesn't see, I don't even know what the government's really involved in this, because a lot of countries don't even allow Grindr to begin with. Country like Canada, I don't think like the way Grindr is available to people in Canada is the same in the US, it's the same in England and other countries. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it plays out, but that's definitely something that I've thought about.
It's difficult.
It's
Yeah,
difficult,
for sure.
yeah. But I think there's something to be said too of just the more in-person to kind of creating those safe spaces, because a lot of people are scared to admit that they're using. There is a lot of social stigma and people don't understand it, and people associate it with being really like sketchy and really dangerous, which it absolutely could be, but it also can be very casual and very normalized. People could be using and still somewhat functioning. It's an upper.
Yeah. A follow-up question, but
sure.
Only if that's what I want to. So to your earlier point about any social media organization that is based in the US forces other participating countries to not be liable for any content that is posted on their platform. I assume that applies to Grindr as well. Do you know if there's like any restrictions when it comes to like, they're clearly talking about some sort of abusive situation or illegal situation that a moderator, like, I don't know.
Yeah, so they do have features where you can report people, and they have like a list of things, like it could be there's spam, because there's also scammers on these applications, and they do like daddy scams, or like sugar daddy scams, and there's a lot of like nefarious things that are happening on the app, and so there are mechanisms to intervene, but they're more self-reported. It doesn't seem like Grindr's really putting a lot of effort into doing that moderation themselves. Kind of like when you're with Facebook and they're like, oh, those are the users, they're doing whatever, but they have the data, they could put the energy and efforts, but they're not. That's sort of how I feel. Yeah, you can definitely report people and block people.
Like from individual to individual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else before we wrap? Okay, thank you again, Carl. The only comment I'll say is connecting both the presentations, like there's an interesting theme around what online platforms and what those are exposing to our real world crowd or humans. But I always try to like challenge literally like our own framing of it is like, if we flip it, it was like, this is a natural extension of our humanity, is to actually have and create online things and virtual things that then affect us. And you try to ask yourself, what are some of our vulnerabilities or weak points that these platforms are exploiting in us? And then that question becomes like, what can we do to pass on to the future generations to more, like basically put a patch on some of these exploitations? And that's something that I've been thinking about between both presentations is like, what does the next generation's plural, almost like a social evolution? How do we evolve to have more resistance to some of the exploitations? And at the end of the day, these platforms do have CEOs and a chief tech officer, like they are people as well. So if you play the humans back to the humans, then you're kind of back into a classic oscillation, like learning, exploiting, and returning. So those are the themes that came to me from connecting both topics. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. That was it for the 140th session. Next, it sounds so. Next month, we'll try to do the same thing. So let your cohort know if there's anyone that wants to present or any of your fellow Map the System contestants. And usually afterwards, if people are available or interested, we go out to have some food nearby. David?
Yeah, so between La Carnitas or go over to the kebab guys. So
all right.
We'll figure out one or the other sides.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone online as well.
Yeah, we actually talked about that in our discussion, right? Like the person who's selling weed to the whole building or whatever it is. Yeah, we talked about that as somebody who's in your community. Yeah, of course that person.
They're a connector, they know it.
Yeah.
I used to live across this
story. Like,
yeah.
Me, like you probably made.
Yeah, my like thinking about where I this is something.
So I was glad everybody didn't rest.
There was a guy, everyone wants the guy. I never met the guy, but I love the guy. You know what I mean? So it's, and they, so yeah, it's just like interesting. They really are. Like, see them, you know, once a week or something. Yes.
I think we also need to look at the extreme convenience you get from the dating app. And all the like extreme delving into everything about them. You know, preferences. This is how people want to find